All right, Jason Khalipa. So you won the CrossFit Games in 2008, and then you're back on the podium in 2013-14. Here we are 10 years later, 2024. What are some things that you've changed your mind on, changed your perspective? Like here we are 10 years later.
Oh man. Well, I think here's one thing I'll say. If I hadn't changed my mind or my perspective in 10 years, like that's not a good thing. Like I'm glad that I've changed my mind on a few things. Like I think as we mature, as we get older, like we should evolve. We should learn more, especially as you have kids and they grow up. Your vantage point just shifts. So I'd say one of the biggest things that's changed for me is like I'm no longer worried about being the fittest on earth. Like for many years, my goal was to win the CrossFit Games and be the fittest human on earth. But with that came a lot of sacrifice, not only from time and time away from the family and time in my body, like my beat down, but also like sacrifice in terms of like, what am I trying to do? So I think the biggest thing that I've changed my mind on the last 10 years is like, what is my why to be fit? Like, why do I want to be fit in the first place? Is it to win medals and sponsorships, or is it to and seek my physical potential in that arena, which at the time was very important to me. But where I've shifted now is like, dude, I want to be able to protect and provide for myself and my family. Like I want to be able to run, jump, climb, lift. I want to be able to always say yes to my kids. If my son comes to me and says, I want to go do X, I want to be able to provide that experience. I never want fitness to inhibit what I need or want to do. And that's been a huge shift in my mindset, is going from being the fittest on earth to now really trying to prioritize, like, I want to be as fit as possible for as long as possible. I want to do that for my kids and my family.
Isn't it wild how in an effort to become fit, fitness often becomes an encumbrance to the things that you need to be fit to do in the first place?
Dude, I mean, here's another thing that I've kind of, I don't want to say I changed my mind on, but I opened my mind up to, is that for many years I would spend hours and hours and hours in the gym just to get better in the gym. And again, I was a professional athlete. It's different than most people, but I wish that I would have spent more time exposing myself to things outside the gym, because it would have just inspired me to keep training in the gym. Meaning the work I was doing in the gym, it's valuable, it works, but it works because I'm now able to go outside the gym and go do anything I want. And jiu-jitsu is a great example of that. My fitness provided me the strength and conditioning and mobility and whatnot to be able to go and execute out here on the mats or outdoors and biking and being in the ocean. I wish I would have done more of that, because it would have just made the work that I was doing in the gym even more fulfilling, because I would have seen the fruit of that labor outside the gym with the kids.
Do you think it was the concept of literally trying to win trophies and medals and sponsorships that prevented you from doing that? Or do you think that there was actually a seed that's planted in you as an athlete, that whether you were a CrossFit Games winner or just a CrossFit Games competitor or not, that would have been there and would have still triggered the same kind of things in a younger Jason? Like, I can speak for myself as an example. I'll be that way, right? I will want to train so bad a certain way that sometimes I will find myself not doing the things that truly bring me joy because I want to go train. And I'm not a professional athlete. I mean, yes, I'm in the professional fitness space, but I'm not an athlete per se. Mm-hmm. So do you think that that's something that you were hardwired to be like, or do you think that came with being a professional athlete?
I put a link down below for Creatine Gummies. I highly recommend you check them out because they're sweetened with allulose. They're not sweetened with a bunch of sugar, and there's 1.5 grams of creatine per gummy. So you could take 1.5 grams, or you could go ahead and load up to 8, 10, 12 grams, whatever you'd like to do to find the sweet spot for you. Creatine is one of the most studied ergogenic compounds that is out there, only next to caffeine. So we look at the literature and we see it's safe. I highly recommend you check them out down below.
I think it's because the professional athlete was such a requirement of my time that I was worried about getting injured doing these other things outside the gym. And also I had to dedicate all my time for in the gym because that's what I was being judged upon. Meaning like my success or failure was judged upon my ability to perform these specific fitness things. I wasn't necessarily being judged at the CrossFit Games or asked to, go hiking with my family, go bike long distances, go do jiu-jitsu. And so I didn't prioritize those things as much because they weren't a part of my professional sport. in hindsight, I wish I had started doing more of that earlier, even with the potential risk of injury, only because being outdoors just like invigorated and exposing myself to new skills like jiu-jitsu only like re-sparked this level of athleticism in me that I hadn't experienced before. Like, I think me doing jiu-jitsu for the last 8 years, I'm a more athletic person today than I was when I was competing professionally at CrossFit, I believe. Not necessarily, I'm not fitter. I'm definitely not fitter than I was back then, but I'm more athletic. I'm more dynamic because of the work I've done on the mats.
That's a really good point that you bring up, though, because I've almost grown to somewhat dislike the word fitness because it almost seems unrealistic for life. Like, we've got functional fitness, which is almost a weird, cheeky term that people throw around. And then we've just got regular fitness. When I think regular fitness, I just think of a big box gym, and like, I almost call it artificial exercise. And it's like there almost needs to be a new word. I mean, it's because when I think of fitness, I don't think of it translating into everyday life. And when you were training extensively for CrossFit, do you think that there was much, if you had have put the time or had the time, do you think it would have translated into athleticism or any additional benefit outside of the gym?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it did. Like, even when I was competing at the CrossFit Games, like, I would never have to worry about my fitness in any physical situation. But sometimes I would train so much. Like, I'll give you an example. There was times where I was so sore because I was training so much that I couldn't go do certain things with the kids because I was so beat up. That's not something I'm accepting today. Like, today, I'm not going to go and do something that I know is going to get me so beat up and sore that I can't go play football with my son. So it's just a different mentality. I do think CrossFit, at least as far as I'm concerned, lays a phenomenal foundation for people who want to do things outside the gym. Like, if you're in the CrossFit gym and you take class 5 days a week, your likelihood of having a physical task come upon you and not being able to do it is pretty slim. I think where I'm talking about is more so like exposing myself to new skills to keep me fired up. Like, I think one of the things that I don't know if I've changed my mind. That's not necessarily the case, but it's like, when I found CrossFit, what I loved about it was I got in a great workout, I met really cool people, and I learned something new. Eventually, after a while, when you've been in the space for long enough, whether it's CrossFit, bodybuilding, you name it, or endurance, you end up, the 2% gains of knowledge, they don't come very often. And when they do, it's few and far between. When you expose yourself to new skills, whether it be archery, firearms, jiu-jitsu, whatever it might be, it unlocks parts of my brain that I found and I fell in love with when I found earlier CrossFit. And that's what I'm exposing myself to more often today, is I'm trying to find new skills that keep me chasing new knowledge versus like chasing a fitter version of myself.
No, that makes a ton of sense, because I would agree that out of all the different workout domains that I've tried, like, CrossFit is what gives me the best base.
Right.
It's still just like anything. You become a specialist, even within CrossFit, which is pretty universal and broad. You're still, in the grand scheme of things, somewhat of a specialist in the gym, right? So there's always going to be that specificity that doesn't always translate into real life. But as far as almost all gym type movements and modalities are concerned, it gives you the best chances of being able to translate. And that's what I've liked. Because, like, yes, I mean, just like you, I still like being in the gym, but I also would rather be with my kids typically. So how do I leverage my time in the gym, which I still enjoy and I love, but how do I get the most bang for the buck out of it? How do I kill two birds with one stone, so to speak? I get the mental piece that I need from my workout and the enjoyment there, but hey, I'm also benefiting my family here. And that's, I think, what I really like about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and again, over the years, like, I've tried a lot of different things. But I think, we could talk about, like, I haven't really changed perspective on like hot, cold, this, that. Like, I still feel the same way about, like, I still feel like people should train. They should generally train at times with others or by themselves. But if they can, around other like-minded people, I think that's great to create the camaraderie, and they should train hard. And I still believe that. And I believe that, at 15 when I started at the gym, and I believe that now at 30, 38, I still believe that we should train hard, we should train with other people, we should train by ourselves, and that what happens in between the ears is something that's more magical than anything that could ever happen physically.
Well, what's some other stuff that you've changed your mind on?
I mean, I think that I have changed my mind in terms of I will not, at least as far as I'm concerned, I will not be doing, when it comes to nutrition challenge, I don't see myself doing a restricted diet nutrition challenge again. I think that we need to be aware as fitness professionals of what signs that shows to our children in terms of, hey, I'm restricting carbohydrates, right? Let's just say, because I've done all kinds of stuff, right? I've done keto, I've done this, I've done that. But let's just take my most recent one. I did 40 days of just meat. And it's hard to do a diet like that without other people noticing. You know, you can go to the gym, you could train harder, you could go do different things, and it's pretty hard for people to necessarily notice, the family, I mean. But the family knows when you're doing something like that. And when you're restricting, I think you just need to be aware of what sign that shows to everyone around you. Because by me doing this, it's me testing myself. It's me seeing how I could, let's just say I chose to do a fast, right? A 3-day fast. Like I would just want to be more aware in the future of what impact that has on the rest of the family and their thoughts for the future. And it's not just about me. It's about the others around me. That's something I've changed my mind on.
I think that's really big, man. Because I've come around a lot in terms of how I look at nutrition as well, with really coming back down to, let's just eat close to the earth. Let's just eat whole foods, right? And a lot of that has come from, of course, the literature, but a lot of it is the same kind of thing. I've got small kids, and although I do experiments with myself and I do different things, I really try to just lay this foundation of just eat wholesome food, eat for nutrition, eat for fuel. And that fuel is, maybe it's a delicious apple, but just teach about food quality. Just teach about quality and let the chips kind of land where they may. Because if you teach quality and you teach nutrition density, everything falls into place.
Right. And I think when you start talking about restrictive diets, what you just said kind of goes out the window a little bit, because you're no longer talking about as food as fuel. You're no longer talking about it as, now all of a sudden in whether you say it or not, there's good and bad associated. So when you say, hey, I'm going to go on a ketogenic diet, or let's just say not even keto, let's just take it even more. Let's just say just carnivore. By doing carnivore, there are a bunch of benefits that we are well aware of. But by design, if you say, wow, I remember specifically, I remember this conversation. I was doing 40 days of just meat. And I remember someone asked me in front of my kids, they said, how do you feel? I said, man, I feel great. My cognitive function is there. I've leaned out tremendously and I feel great. I don't think this is sustainable, but I feel good and I'm glad I did it. That's what I said. So now subconsciously, what did I just put in the kids' minds? That are carbs bad? Dad feels good when he's just on this. So I think that's something I'm going to be aware of for the future is words are powerful. And at a young age, we're imprinting our children every single day. And we need to look at it in a 360-degree view, not oh, my buddy challenged me to say I'm going to do it. When it comes to food, I think you need to be more aware because it's so family focused, right? It's not if I challenge you tomorrow, I say, hey, Thomas, I want to go do this ruck. Can you start rucking 10 miles a day? No one else in your family would really be involved. Yeah. They wouldn't even need to know. But as soon as you start doing food, when you have food dinners, when you're going out to eat, everything you do that revolves around food, especially in our family, Italian, Persian cultures, it involves everybody.
That's a really good point. It's a slippery slope. And it's also, we live in a world now where even though some people get weirded out by having these discussions about, hey, maybe we need to be careful about how we talk about food. And they get weirded out being oh, well, we can't just dance around this big issue. Well, there's that talk, and then there's the flat out reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is the language that we use surrounding food, the actions that we take do affect people, no matter whether you like it or not, they do. And that is the reality of the situation. And you can look at it, you can say, well, oh, people are fragile snowflakes and they just can't deal with the fact that we're restricting diet. You can have those feelings all day long, but you also have to accept the fact that this is the reality of the situation. It's the way that it is. And maybe you don't like the way the world is today, because maybe it's not the way it was 20 years ago, but it's just the way that it is. If you talk about food a certain way, you can really mess people up. And in turn, you mess yourself up too.
Dude, what you said is so powerful because I'm definitely a believer in tough, we don't need a soft culture. We need to be tough. Life is going to be hard. and we cannot raise our children or ourselves in a world where everything's just going to be a piece of cake. Because the reality is, eventually, everybody's going to get kicked in the stomach, right? That's my belief. However, having a conversation with an adult about something as sensitive as food is one thing, because they could have a conversation. You could articulate a position to them, and they could discuss it with you. But they've had years and years and years of whatever their background is to develop an opinion on food, whatever that, right, wrong, or indifferent. I think where I differ in the position is with the youth, because I do think you need to be softer with your approach. I do think you need to be very, very aware of what you say and how you say it, because it's imprinting on the kids every single day, and you never know what impact that's going to have. And I'm sharing that with, like, that's super close to home for me as a guy who wouldn't have said that like a year or two ago. I firmly believe that we need to be well aware of that, especially with our kids. Adults, I still think you should be sensitive. I think of course, I don't think you should be a jerk about it, but you can have more of a, kind of like, this is the way I believe. But with children, you have to be really aware of what they see and what they're picking up.
I think what's very important about this, and unfortunately, not everyone has the emotional intelligence, the EQ to like kind of understand this with who they're talking to, but you also need to know your audience.
100%.
So like, if I'm talking to you as an athlete and we're talking about peri-workout carbohydrates, timing, and this and that, that is a different ballgame than talking to the masses. That is a different ballgame than sitting down at home and how you're, oh, honey, hey, don't make me that sweet potato because I'm not going to eat that carb. There's also a difference between announcing it to the world too. Like, this isn't an airport. You don't need to announce your arrival and departure with whatever diet you're doing sometimes too. And I've learned that when I'm doing experiments on myself and I'm testing different things, even from my channel, I'm like, I actually don't need to go home and be like, hey, Amber, like, don't make me a sweet potato, or our kids know I'm not having those carbohydrates. Like, sometimes it's as simple as, I just make my decision and I don't make a big deal about it. And it's kind of one of those things where, okay, no big deal. But you go home and be like, nope, not eating carbs, not doing this. You guys with me or not?
And then it's like, well, why not? Like, and then all of a sudden, and you might not even see it at the moment, but you might be creating habits. It's something that anybody who's like really deep in the fitness space, anybody who's like really deep in it, like you and I are, we both need to be well aware that there are people on all different spectrums of food and fitness and you name it, right? But we need to be in control of what's in our control. And what's in my control is trying to share a message. Like, I believe training hard and can benefit you in so many different ways, from the mental, from the physically, emotionally, all kinds of ways. And I could share that with people. But when it comes to food, I am going to take, I've never really had like a really hard stance on food. Like I've never been that guy who's like super tough about it, but I have had my opinions on different things. But I think what I've learned in the last couple of years is that when it comes to children, we just need to be hyper aware of when you are a fitness fanatic like we are, what we say matters and how we act matters. And, we need to be aware of it.
Anything else you've changed your mind on in the last 5-10 years?
I mean, I've always been a fan of as of recently, I've incorporated more sauna and cold plunge, but I've been doing that for a while.
Let's do that one. That's a good one. Even though I think because people want to hear that kind of stuff.
Well, here's what I will say, is that there's a lot of information on the sauna and cold plunge about when to do it and what to do and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this, right? So 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I didn't really incorporate sauna, cold plunge, any of that. And I didn't because like I really focused on training hard, sleeping well, and hydrating. I still think that's like the meat and potatoes. And I think that a lot of times people get caught up in these like recovery hacks and they're forgetting about like the foundation. So the foundation is like training consistently, hydrating well, and sleeping well. Assuming you have that, I think it's worth noting above that, right? Like, how are you fueling your body and what are you doing for recovery? So in the last, I'd say like 3 years, I've been pretty focused on the hot and cold therapy. And I think it's been something that's been really good for me because from a cellular level, and you can maybe talk about the science, but science aside, I just do it because it's hard. In particular, the cold plunge is super hard for me. And so adding that into my routine, adding that into my life makes me show up better for others around me. So I get in the cold plunge every morning. sometimes after workout, sometimes before workout, sometimes hours before, whatever. I don't really care. What I care about is I'm choosing to do something hard and it makes the rest of my day seem easier and I could show up better for others around me.
I mean, anecdotally, have you noticed a difference in recovery and stuff, or is it just purely mental for you?
It's purely mental. Like maybe recovery, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, right now my current protocol is I get in the sauna. It's hot. I don't know exactly how hot. It's like it's the high hundreds, whatever, for 20 minutes. And I go in the cold plunge. And that's the way I've been starting my day lately. And the reason why I'm doing that is I've been going through a little bit more stress lately. And I've been trying to find a way to not just wake up in the morning, go hit a workout, drink a cup of coffee, fast till like noon. Cause I found myself getting a little bit anxious, a little bit jittery, a little bit whatever. So I try to like postpone the coffee a little bit and just hit the cold plunge in the sauna. And it's done wonders for me, man. It really has. It's allowed me to kind of like ground myself in the morning and just start off my day better.
I wish more people would look at cold plunge and sauna like that instead of trying to find some like little mechanistic piece of data to justify why they're doing it, because I love the out of my cold plunge and I love the hell out of my sauna. But in sauna, there's a lot of benefit to a sauna. And I fall on the sword. I've created a lot of content surrounding the mechanistic actions of saunas. But the cold plunges, people can vouch that have watched my videos, be like, yeah, Thomas is actually pretty hard-nosed on like show me the real data that a cold plunge is actually like doing something for you other than it just feels good because it's hard. But I do those videos and then I go home and I jump in my cold plunge. So like, I mean, I look at that and I say like objectively, like I don't see a lot of data that says a cold plunge is doing a whole lot for our recovery. And most of the data shows it is doing something, but we don't know what. Like it helps people feel better. Yeah. But I am kind of with you in the fact that like, it probably aids in recovery just because it's hard and it feels good. Like it's just doing something that makes, I don't know if you know like Dr. Bruce Lipton, he's a little bit kind of like woo-woo-y, but he's kind of the guy that's talked a lot about kind of your perception of things is like what paves almost your epigenetics of it and how you like build around it and how you get stronger and whatnot. And it's almost like epigenetically, maybe our perception of doing something hard is making us a little bit stronger. And like, we can't discount that. Like as woo-woo as that is, like if you mentally condition yourself to be able to handle things that are harder and you perceive it as a benefit, there's probably a benefit. So there's nothing wrong with like cold plunging and sauna if you like it. Dude,
I think that like, I shared this like a long time ago, but I was just like, you could talk about the brown fat loss. You could talk about, cellular, whatever. You could talk about whatever you want about cold plunge. I don't even care what temperature you say to have it at. Like my cold plunge, I'm gonna be honest. Now, maybe my thermometer's wrong. It's not that cold. It's at 54 degrees. Mm-hmm. And for me, at 54 degrees, it's hella hard to get into. It is hard for me to get into.
Your NorCal is showing, by the way.
Yeah, the hella. It is hard for me to get into, especially if I'm not going to the sauna, right? If I just like walk out, get in the cold plunge, that's hard for me. I suck in the cold. So for me, like I'm winning. Like when I get out of that cold plunge, I don't care what literature there is on it. I feel like I intentionally chose something hard. I was able to like calm my breath and I feel great. So that's why I do it. And I think that if you get too wrapped up in the science, you start saying, oh, I have to do it 2 hours after workout, 2 hours before workout. It just starts making it too complicated. Yeah. It's like at the end of the day, man, just go do hard things and it's going to be better.
Yep. And if you miss it, don't worry about it. Just jump in when you want to jump in.
Here's one thing I have also changed my mind about in the last 10 years. I used to think that the only effective workout was only if it was multi-joint, compound, and functional. So I used to think that like, and this is probably because, so I started off in the traditional health club when I was 15 and I did, playing sports and I did traditional bodybuilding. Then I found Muay Thai. That was a little bit different. It's Thai kickboxing. Then I found CrossFit. And when I found CrossFit, it was all about multi-joint, compound, right? And functional in nature, right? So like you're talking thrusters and deadlifts and back squats, they're compounds. So when you look at like what muscle groups does the deadlift work, I don't know, right? But what pattern does it work? It works a pulling, it works a hinge. I mean, it works a bunch of different muscle groups. You glutes, hamstrings, spinal erectors, whatever. But the point I'm trying to make is like versus traditional bodybuilding, you say, oh, what are you working on those incline bicep curls? Oh, I'm working the bicep, da 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 da. I used to frown upon muscle isolation. And I used to think it didn't have a place in my training, that all I cared about was compound. Now I see value in isolated movements, in particular for aesthetics, if that's what you're choosing to go for, and just to feel a damn good pump. And so for that, I don't frown upon that at all anymore. Whereas I would have, and I think CrossFit as a whole has evolved, because back in the day, you would never see people doing curls as accessory work. Now you see it more often. And that's also where my mind has changed, is that there's a way that you could do accessory work on the shoulders and whatnot, where you could really start to isolate muscle groups in a way that you can't in compound movements.
I'm really glad you said that one, because it's sometimes I will drink the Kool-Aid too much, where I'm feeling if I'm not doing some major compound move or a thruster or something, it's not a sufficient workout. And that's not how I built my physique. Like, it's honestly not. Like, I didn't get to where I am in fitness and as far as my aesthetics are concerned by only training that way. That was a big piece of it for sure. I did train that way. I always loved my squat, my bench press, my military press, the big compound movements. But I did a crap ton of isolation stuff. And now, like, recently I've kind of gone back to that and adding those in, because it's almost like you think, okay, if I do a thruster, there's this like metabolic drive with it where you're like, I feel the furnace going. If you do isolation moves hard enough, you get within a pretty good striking distance of that too. You may not be having a lung burner,
right?
But like the metabolic drive, like, and just go faster. Between your sets, like do an accessory work on your biceps and then jump over and do the triceps, like whatever.
Right.
Like, it's like, who's keeping score? Like, you know?
Well, and one other thing to think about is that what I noticed is that, especially now that I haven't been like hardcore training CrossFit like all day, every day, and I'm doing jujitsu and I'm training for tactical games and doing different stuff, is that my hips are super dynamic and strong, but my structural, like the muscle groups that support my shoulders and just like these like kind of micro muscle groups are not as developed. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is that, like, if I'm doing power cleans, for example, or if I'm doing snatches, or if I'm doing thrusters, most of these movements go from core to extremity, right? Most of these movements. And most functional movements radiate from core to extremity, like throwing a punch, a golf swing, whatever, right? They radiate from your hips into these like smaller muscle groups, right? Like a punch, for example, or throwing a baseball. And so you start to develop this core, because that's the real driver. But I think that at times, the further you radiate out from what's driving the power, the less focus and attention you're putting on those particular muscle groups. And so when I have gotten back into snatching and stuff, I feel some instability in my shoulders in different areas, because I think I've neglected some of those, like just isolation. Now, granted, I haven't been snatching as much too, but I think if I had done a little bit more isolated type work, even when I was competing, it would have benefited me.
Yeah. Well, otherwise your body's probably different. You've changed. There's such a specificity to like a snatch and things like that. And like, you know, if you're doing a barbell snatch versus a dumbbell snatch, I mean, just that alone is going to be a different situation in terms of stability and kind of like internal, external rotation and whatnot. So no, I dig that, man. Well, Jason, where can everyone find you, brother?
Best place to find me, probably Instagram at Jason Khalipa. And then if you're looking for just great workouts that we both love, you can check out the Train Hard app. We have 3 different programs: Force, Flex, and EMOM, just for different seasons. One to help you act the part, look the part, and never let momentum get to zero is that EMOM program.
Yep. And I can safely go on record and say that probably a good 70% of the time, like, your app is what I'm using for my training programming. So that's legit. So, all right, brother.
There you go.